The Classics of Antiquity and the Rise of Faith, Module 5A. With the classics, we start with ancient Greeks. We have here what we call orders. So we are looking at the Doric with a very simple neck structure, Ionic with a scroll, and the Corinthian with the leaf motif, the acanthus leaf, and a small volute. Initially, Greeks have city-states, which we call polis, okay, and they were united during the reign of the Macedonian king. Now, they were able to defeat their enemies using this really nice and quick shift that they have created with a nice, the weapon in the front. And because of this, they were able to reign over a huge area, and some other cities joined them, which we will now call the Delian League. Now, the Greeks have a very simple plan for their uh, me what we call a megaron, like a simple palace. They also have their own writings. And, this is a funny clip that you can watch. My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where Mr. Portokalos was saying, uh, give him a word, any word, and he'll be able to show you that the root of that word is Greek. Okay. Now, going back to the floor plan for the Megaron in Mycenae, which is a palace type structure, you see the development of the temple down to Samos, Selinus, and the temple of Zeus in Olympia. So it's from a simple megaron in Mycenae. So you can see the iteration of design, right? So you start with maybe something simple, right? That's something we can learn from the Egyptian, even from the Greeks, creative people. Now, even with modern architecture, one that you can see from Module 1, the SIGRAM, we can see that the narrator was trying to say that the inspiration for the SIGRAM could be uh, analyzed toward or from the Greek Parthenon, one of the most beautiful temple, one that is copied or became the inspiration in Western buildings. So what are the influences? So here we have the following. We can see the vertical lines like column fluting, right? So column fluting. So this is a fluting for a column. And the vertical lines we can see could be likened to the fluting as an inspiration. At the back, you can see the elevator, the core that's made of travertine marble. Similarly, in the Parthenon, we have marble as the main material. The use of classical proportion. So if you analyze why is this Greek Parthenon temple beautiful, it's because of its proportion. Very proportional, and likewise incorporated a raised platform. So you can see here is a somewhat a raised platform for the Seagram building. And of course, we have the stylobate, the raised platform for the Parthenon. So again, where do we see this megaron? We can see it in the citadel. That's a fortified city right at the center we'll see the Megaron, and then there'll be houses around, and then it's a walled city. Okay, so this is during the Neolithic age, Greek Neolithic age. As we can see, there are importance in columns. The Egyptian used this. The Greeks, they have their orders. So the Greeks use the Greek, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders. So they were the ones who started this. The image is not that clear. The next slide will show something better. The Romans use all of this, what the Greeks has, and they also have the Roman Tuscan. They have their Roman Doric with the base, and similar to the Corinthian, but much larger. Larger. Normally, I would differentiate it with the volute right here, much larger. Everything is larger, but the volute will be my differentiating uh, difference or point. So that's the Roman composite. The main parts of an order will be the base, the fluting, the shaft, okay, and then the capital at the top. For the Doric, we have the echinus neck, and then there's a like a flat base here, the abacus. That's the part of a column. Now, looking at the proportion of the columns, we'll have the Doric, which is a lot smaller in proportion, okay, versus a Corinthian, or sorry, uh, Ionic, and then of course the grander will be the uh, Corinthian. Now, what are the parts of the entablature? The entablature is the beam, right? So we have here a metope. This is where bas relief or sculpture will be placed. The triglyph, and then the architrave. And then for the capital, we have the abacus, the echinus, and a necking. For the Ionic, we have the abacus, which is quite small, and then a scroll-like volute. Okay, so we have the flute, which is the interior or downward round part of the curve for the fillet. Okay, for the Corinthian, we have the boss to differentiate from a Ionic, a volute, which is smaller, okay, a rosette, like a rose, a petal, the acanthus leaf. So the inspiration for the leaf is the acanthus leaf, okay. Right here, we have teeth-like, okay, dentures, or what we call dentil. Then, of course, this is the pediment, okay. We have the acroterion. These are counterweight, so it serves some type of a purpose. Now, their proportion is based from the diameter at the base. So, for example, the entablature, again, entablature is the beam. It is two times the column diameter. So, the column diameter, the height of this is twice of that. The column for the Doric is eight times the column diameter, and so on and so forth. Now, at the height of the classical Greek age, we have the Acropolis, which is the domain of the gods, and the Agora, the place below the Acropolis, that will be the Agora or the place for the people. Here's a nice section for the Parthenon. The column here is made of drums, right? Of marble. And initially, they would have this nice knob that they can carry through a wooden crane. A precision tool, wooden in those days, will be placed at the center that will allow them to know how to center these drums. And then they will chip off the knob and then create uh, fluting. So that will be done after. Okay. So they would query this. They are doing a little restoration, actually a lot, right? And they're still using the same quarry of marble. And they're trying to not completely reconstruct this, but to a certain point so that it's more recognizable, but not to the degree where it is new. Okay, again, the crane, wooden crane used for during the building of this temple, and now, of course, we're using iron cranes. Now, the Greeks, when they place their building, they place it at an angle. So you notice that the entrance will be somewhere here. And when you enter Acropolis, you will see the building at its most beautiful angle. Okay. So you see two sides of the temple. Unlike the Romans, when you look at a Roman temple, or building for that matter, it will be from the front, right? So axial, very axial. So that's a main difference between the Romans and the Greek. Okay, so again, the Acropolis, the place for the god, and then down below will be the place for the people, the Agora. Now, right here, or if you notice in today's age, the top or the tallest towers will be used for commercial places. In those days, the market will be down below, but the places for the gods, where they will look up to, will be at the highest point of the land. In the Acropolis, we'll see a nice caryatid porch where, beautiful sculptural columns can be seen. And these are replicas now, the ones in Greece. The original are in the British Museum. Okay, so okay. Now the Agora, we'll see there what we call the like a shopping mall, the Stoa. Okay, and it will look very similar to how we plan our shopping malls, a nice big hallway and then different shops all around. Okay, so that's the Agora down below. Then we move to ancient Romans. Ancient Romans, we see the building construction system done mostly not by post and lintel construction, similar to the Roman temple, but they like to build with arches. Now, arches has been, seen in the areas of like Mesopotamia, but ancient Rome would like to always use technologies that they see in their empire. So they use and saw that the arches, as we have seen in our activity, are very strong, can carry a huge amount of weight and can span, really longer than what a beam can carry. So notice here there's a lot of columns. That's the limitation of the post and lintel construction. You cannot really span a longer opening area because the beam will break versus the strength of an arch. So we see that in aqueducts. Okay. So they built aqueducts, Colosseum. Colosseum is like a symphony of arches. Okay. And then they build roads. They have some forum. Okay. The basilica is a law court. So where the judge will sit, okay, where cases will be heard. So for the Romans, the basilica is not a church. Okay. It becomes a church during the early Christian period. Okay. So we have bridges, they have monuments, okay, of course, temple. Their temple looks similar to the Parthenon, but actually, again, you go in at the front, so you will see and walk through the Roman temple from the front. And then there will be walls here where columns are engaged to the wall. So somehow they block that wall. That's these columns here is what we call the engaged column. They have triumphal arches to celebrate the victories that they have against their enemies when they try to conquer different lands. Now, one of the best buildings that they have is this temple done by their emperor Hadrian, the Pantheon. Pantheon means temple for all gods. Okay, and you see here again, when you go to the front, you'll see that it looks like a regular standard Roman temple. But after you go in, you actually will not see this. They try to cover this cylindrical drum, which is the wall carrying the dome. So you're not going to see that in ancient Roman time. But then when you go in, you'll see the huge concrete dome. Okay. Now, we were talking about, what was wrong, or is there something wrong or not right with the Pantheon? We'll discuss that in class. One of the beauty of the Pantheon is the way it is positioned, right? So maybe you will ask, why is the Pantheon facing the north? Normally, the building would be facing south where the sun is. But in this case, the Pantheon is actually facing north so that when you take photographs at the front, you'll be backlighted, right? So the sun will be shining from the back. Well, during the anniversary of the founding of Rome, the sun will hit straight down to the ark and then into the entrance as if welcoming the emperor as he enters, as if he is one of the gods being lighted from the top or the sky, right? So there's a nice video showing that and explaining how it's done. Because at the very top, there is an oculus or an eye. It's like an eye to the sky. And wonderfully, it doesn't really rain that much or it will not pour inside, even with this big uh, opening, right? It will not rain inside. There's an inscription here. It says Marcus Agrippa, Lucius Filius, Consul Fecit. Okay. So Marcus Agrippa, the son of Lucius Filius Consul for the third time, right, made this building. But of course, this here is not anymore done by Agrippa. So this is building done by Hadrian. And of course, they try to attribute it to a higher emperor. Now, this column here at the front are really large columns. And this is granite, one piece, one whole piece, right, from Egypt. So it's about 100 tons each. And how many are they? One, two, three times one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, right? So normally it will come from Egypt and it will cross the Mediterranean and then to Rome. See, they have the power. They have all this empire, and they can use materials from the entire empire. And this building being, one of the best building that they would create, right? No less than a granite from Egypt, right, is needed. So they have here white marble base from Greece, right? Now, because of that, that's a huge construction logistic problem, right? How do you bring all these columns, right? Before they even have the technology, concrete. Now, because of that, let me just show you, maybe what's wrong or maybe not right with this column. Look at this triangle here. Notice how it is higher than the pediment, right? So if you think about it, there could have been something wrong. The right way of doing this, and you'll see that in most temple, is to raise this up to that location. So maybe they built this already. They're waiting for the Egyptian granite, and because of the waves, maybe typhoon, maybe they have encountered something that the actual height, which is should be higher, right? Proportionally, it should be higher. Should have been up to this point. So taller column. Maybe it fell, the ship wrecked, and it fell into the Mediterranean. But the Romans, being pragmatic, uh, you know, could have used any granite. Maybe there was a smaller project in the empire, so they took that and constructed this portico here. And maybe that's the reason why it is taller. I'm not. I wouldn't agree that this was by design. I think this was an error, okay, or something that they contended with, so as to finish the project, to allow for the, maybe celebration of the opening. Now, imagine this one here, the cylindrical wall. That is about 20 feet. 20 feet. Imagine 20 feet, right? So try to, measure 20 feet. That's how thick this wall is to carry the huge structure of a dome. Now, how did they construct the dome? At the bottom will be the heavy aggregate. Okay, so travertine basalt, right? Mixed with concrete. And then they have this dome, and then they also would have some iron ring to support against tension. Remember again the arch that we built in class. And then at the middle, right, they would have pumice aggregate, or sorry, brick aggregate at the middle. And then at the top will be pumice aggregate, and the lightest of material, air. Now, how come there's no keystone? If this is an arch, where's the keystone, right? So there's a stone ring here at the top that serves as the keystone to transfer load from the top down to the base or the cylindrical drum. And of course, it's using Corinthian order at the top. Now, like what we said, arches, right, are really strong. And the Colosseum, which is a magnificent structure that is where, our Sky Dome and different arenas, stadium are patterned from, is actually made out of arches all around, right? So if you watch this video right here, it will show you how the Colosseum was made. And what's beautiful is that uh, the area, when it's hot, right, is actually covered, similar to our dome, okay, where it can be closed when it is not, it's going to maybe rain. Uh, this one also closes, right, with all this cloth, right, that sailors operate so that they can retract and close it to provide shade. Retractable stadium cover. Now, we said basilica earlier. The basilica, here's how it looks like, is actually a law court, like the Supreme Court. So that's what basilica is during ancient Roman times. Now, basilica will become the church in the early Christian period. They also have libraries. Look at this one, beautiful. Undulating walls, columns. Okay. So this is in the Library of Celsus in Ephesus. Now remember Vitruvius. Vitruvius talked about firmitas, venustas, okay, utilitas. Now he also said that houses should have an ideal, right? So we call it domus italica, ideal Roman house. So an ideal house would have the following. There will be an entrance, okay? And then you have here in the front some shops or rental units, okay? And then number two, they'll have the atrium, right, where you greet the visitors. In the middle is an impluvium, right? Like a pool. There's a compluvium at the top where rainwater will fill in this uh, impluvium. Then in the middle, very central, right? So you can see who's entering, who's coming in, who's what's happening inside the house. That will be the master's bedroom, sometimes converted to a library. So maybe the master of the house will sit here, maybe read books. Okay. Then you have the dining kitchen. At the two sides will be a altar, alley. Okay. And then at the back will be a garden. So that's what Vitruvius said should be the ideal Roman house. Now, if you go to Pompeii, you'll see that houses are set up the way Vitruvius planned it. So here we have what? Number one will be the entrance, and then we have the cella, the shops in front. So even if the shape is different, but the uh, location of the rooms is similar to what Vitruvius prescribed. So we have bedrooms, the atrium, of course, the master's library, the altar. You have the dining. Here they have a portico influenced by the Greeks, and then a garden. So you'll find this in the module, different houses with similar prescribed spaces uh, by Vitruvius. Okay, then we move to early Christian. So early Christian after Rome became or Christianity became the main religion of the empire, Roman Empire. So there came the blossom of the uh, Christian religion. So we call this Byzantine because the emperor brought Christianity or the center of Christian in Constantinople. So Constantine was the emperor then who won against his opponents by the sign of the cross. So legend says he saw the sign of the cross in the sky, and he said, "By this you will fight." So after winning, he made the Christian religion. Initially allowed in the empire and then eventually became the main religion. Now, one of the great structure then is the old St. Peter's Basilica, where the Peter's Basilica is now. So this is how it looked like before. So that's early Christian architecture. Initially, they were celebrating and doing their mass in the catacombs of Rome. That would be underground. Okay, so it's like an underground religion, but eventually uh, became the number one religion. So you'll see uh, different structure like the San Vitale Ravenna, which we're going to look at later, Santa Maria Maggiore. Okay, and they would have converted. They converted the basilica. So initially the structure would be the basilica, converted that into a church, and they still call it a basilica. Now, in Constantinople, you see the Hagia Sophia, right? So they built the Hagia Sophia as a Christian church. So right now it is a mosque. It used to be a Christian church, and then it became a mosque, and then a museum. Now I think it's back into a mosque and some parts museum. So the St. Peter's Basilica was placed originally where the Circus of Nero was. Now, this is the site where St. Peter was buried. So he is the apostle of Christ, and he was crucified upside down and was buried here. Okay. So they converted this into the old St. Peter's Basilica. So the form of the basilica is like what we call a Latin cross. A Latin cross has is a cross that has a long uh, down segment, right? And then a shorter one crossing it. So that's the Latin cross versus the Greek cross. The Greek cross is like a plus sign. Now, they will have the nave, so similar to the basilica, a nave where the people will congregate here. And then at the transept, there will be the altar. And then at the back, they will have a chapel. We call that the apse. Now, pilgrims will come from different places and they will go inside. There will be different chapels here on the side so as not to disturb the nave, right? So they can enter here, go around, and then go outside. So mass could be going on, celebration could be going on, and pilgrims can also be visiting the area. Early Christian churches have this type of structure where they have wooden ceiling with coffers. And then they have the triumphal arch as well, where sometimes you see images of the victorious Christ, the apse at the back, an altar, and then the nave where you'll have pews or sitting area. Okay, they have the colonnade in this case with Ionic order. So this is at Santa Maria Maggiore, right? Strong, massive structure from the outside. Of course, this has already been rebuilt and added on to in time. The Basilica at Santa Savina in Rome, right? So again, you see the triumphal arch with the triumphant Jesus wooden ceiling with coffers. Maybe there'll be mosaic here, now gone. Okay, the apse, and then the altar, nave, and then there the arcade. So this is the Basilica of Constantine. Initially was you can see here, law court. So they're hearing cases, but eventually converted to church. So that's why we call it Basilica. It's actually the law court. And this is the Hagia Sophia. Initially, you would have found a cross at the top of the dome. Now, this is a beautiful structure, but it rests on not a cylindrical base, which is what we find in the Roman Pantheon. So how did they do that? Support this dome with a cylindrical base on top of a square wall, right? So there's that square area, okay, and there's that dome. So how did they do that? Well, notice this triangular shape right here. To transfer load from this circular area, they need to create a structure, okay? And you see that right here, that triangular structure. That's what we call a pendentive, okay? So with the pendentive, we're able to create or transfer load. So this is an arch right here. And then there's an arch right there. So you get a square base. With the pendentive, you're able to transfer the load from the circular dome to the pendentive down to the column. Magnificent, right? So the pendentive. So how do you place a dome circular base on a square shape dome? You use a pendentive as a support, which is what they perfected in the Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia is now converted into a mosque, so you now see the minarets. And this is one of the uh, buildings copied throughout the empire. So you see a lot of versions of the Hagia Sophia. And even in Istanbul, you see the Blue Mosque, very similar to the Hagia Sophia, the way it was constructed.